All right. Hello, everyone. We are getting this webinar started. Hello to everyone on Facebook. Hello to everyone who is extra awesome and registered and is joining us here right inside of the webinar. We are super excited to see all of you. And thank you, everyone, for coming. We're just going to wait just a minute here as people start to roll in. But I want to go ahead and let you know that, introduce myself. My name is Joshua Vonderheide, and I am the founder of the Percussion Conservatory, which is the platform you are watching right now. It's a platform for classical percussionists who are interested in growing as musicians, who are interested in growing as educators, who are interested in sharing their art form with one another and creating a stronger community. And it's our mission to make classical percussion more accessible to everyone worldwide who wants to have a career in classical music, or who's just a fan, or who's interested. So we're super excited to have you here today, and I want to go ahead and introduce our events manager, Stephen Keener, who's down at probably the bottom of your screen, and he is been an instrumental part of the Percussion Conservatory. He's going to be handling the chat and the Q&A today, and he also helps us plan and organize all of our events and our curriculum for the studio, which is happening next year. We're going to have 50 live master classes in an exclusive studio for you guys. And so Stephen and I have been putting that together. And last but certainly not least is our special guest for today and our masterclass presenter, Mr. David Liu, who is the Associate Principal Timpanist with the Shanghai Philharmonic, and he also plays percussion there. And he is going to be presenting his class, the 411, on the rep. And it's all about, man, he recorded so much stuff. It's amazing, guys. You're really in for a treat today. It's all about double timpani rep and just being a great assistant timpanist in that role when you have to play double timpani, and just assistant timpani in general in the orchestra. He's got a ton of great tips and tricks and advice and experience to share with you. And so we're just thrilled to have you here today, David. So, Stephen, could you just explain to everyone how the chat and the Q&A works, and then David will pass it off to you after that. Good to have you here, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks,
welcome
Josh.
to
Happy to be here.
the stream, everyone. It's great to have David here today, and we're really excited to share his class with you. If you have questions during his class, please use the Q&A button that's at the bottom. In normal Zoom, you can use the Q&A there, and then we can see all the questions come through. If you have any comments, or if you're having any technical issues or anything like that, you can use the chat for that. But yeah, please use the Q&A for your questions. So I'll be monitoring that, and I'll make sure we get to all the questions before the end of the class, so don't worry. So without any further ado, yeah, I'll pass it over to David, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Stephen. Happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. So, sorry, I have two Zooms running. So, um, basically, my class is going to talk about how the assistant timpani functions musically in the percussion section, because I truly believe that we occupy a very unique role within not just the percussion section, but in the orchestra as a whole. There are not too many positions that require you to have two section titles. Um, so the assistant timpanist is truly unique in that facet. Um, I believe the assistant is really sort of the chameleon of the entire orchestra, because you have the most responsibilities as far as instruments go, like what you're responsible for. And your musical role as a result is really, really varied. So what this means is sometimes you play um, like a principal timpani, and then other times you really have to be a follower, and that's reflected really in the audition list when you receive it. Um, for other instruments, trumpet, horn, violin, if you are not playing principal, you are playing a different set of repertoire. You know, second violins have their own list. A lower stand bass might get the lower divisi on an audition list. Low horns will always play, you know, fourth and eighth horn parts on their audition lists. But percussion is the only group of instruments where, regardless of the position, we're really always being tested on the principal part, even though we most of the time will not be playing it. That's where assistant timpani changes a little bit because we have a double timpani repertoire included. So now we have to show how expansive we are musically through how we perform this repertoire, whether we play it by ourselves, with the principal timpanist, with the percussion section, and how we play it in the audition, if that makes sense. Um, so without going too far into it, um, let's let's hear an example first. So Josh, if you can load the first example, um, and I'll give a little background on it. This is Siegfried's funeral march from the Götterdämmerung, or Ragnarok, Twilight of the Gods, by Richard Wagner. And this is just a good example of how the assistant timpanist sort of functions in a variety of ways.
Hey, very sorry. Just one moment as I pull that up. My my QuickTime has multiple windows open, and it's decided to have a little game with me. I apologize. Just one moment. I have it coming right as we speak.
Perfect. Okay, so there you go. Um, I wanted to start off with this example because it'll be played often on its own, separate from the opera, and it's a really just good example of seeing how two timpanists can function together. So in all the videos, the player you see on the left will be timpani 1, and the player on the right will be timpani 2, for clarification. So in this selection, the two players, they really feed into each other, which we'll see that kind of a lot in a lot of these examples. So when they can work together really well, and this assistant can support the principal really well, then they in turn can support the band. The second timpanist also is able to take a more predominant role at the end of the excerpt when the orchestra modulates to, E flat, B flat. And so that's where you can sort of play a little bit more like a principal timpani rather than an assistant, um, which is always very gratifying for us. Some other things about how I play that passage. So we have this sort of this heartbeat motif from the ring cycle, this bum 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 bum. It comes up in the very famous second timpani solo at the beginning of this piece with the 9 tuplet. And so this motif, to make it clear when there's so many people playing, uh, I play with a slower stroke for the bum bum, and then when I play that second one, because it acts more like a pickup, I like to play that third note just like a little bit quicker so it speaks properly. Um, Something else you may have noticed is I choose unique places to tune the timpani during this passage, because the trumpet, who is really the instrumental voice for Siegfried, the hero of this whole ring cycle, um, the trumpet voice is so important. And so I really want to make sure I'm in tune with the trumpet, especially after we modulate and go into a new key, because it's very obvious when a timpanist is just slightly out from what the band is doing. But at least if you're with the principal trumpet at that point, no one can really fault you. That makes sense. So, um, moving on about that. So I'm talking a lot about this idea of leading versus following as an assistant timpanist, and that's really quite important when you score study, and when a piece of double timpani repertoire or concerto repertoire falls in your lap, and you really need to do your homework and know where am I really playing like a soloist, where am I playing sort of a tutti part, but I'm playing a really predominant function within that whole tutti playing, and when am I sort of really not super important, when can I sort of musically lay back a little and let someone else shine. um, that's super important. And so that comes up a lot when we look at our audition lists, because the associate timpani position of an orchestra, it's the only one where we're not playing entirely principal timpani rep. Now we have these double timpani repertoire coming in. We have concertos coming in. We have pieces of music that we don't really view as very complicated, but they'll pop up. And this is really to test your ability to understand that role of, am I a follower at this point, or am I supposed to, take charge and do my job to carry the band a little bit. Um, so moving on, the next example, Josh, let's play the Berlioz, the fourth movement. So real quick before we start this one, um, you guys will notice that I play the opening, the very famous sextuplet opening, um, not as how Berlioz wrote it, um, but so just so I don't jar any people, this is your warning. So Josh, you can go ahead and play it. All right. So let's talk about the fourth movement. A very famous passage for double timpani right in the beginning. Perhaps one of the most famous timpani solos in general in the standard repertoire. So Berlioz originally notates it as playing all the sextuplets with one hand, and you're playing a double stop for the very first note only. But when the tempo gets so fast, I feel like sometimes that's not very practical unless you've got very, very good chops or you're using small enough sticks that you're able to leverage that. Um, but sometimes that's also just not possible because the orchestra or the acoustic you're playing in does not really, uh, it's not really appropriate for you to use, smaller sticks. So when the tempo gets that fast, what do you do? So I opted to play it with an alternated sticking, which is a flam, and then just regular alternate sticking starting with my left. Um, the other thing I do is I play the flam in two different beating spots. So the grace note's in the normal beating spot, um, but then the principal note is played a little more towards the center. If you had noticed, that way we can just sort of bring out that feel, the boom, 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 get this real rollicking feel of uh, an execution, and you're marching down the streets, to your doom. Um, so I think alternating the sticking, especially at faster tempos, um, helps to create better horizontal flow, and it'll provide sort of that placement and rhythmic cleanliness that we would otherwise get with the original sticking at a slower tempo. The other thing is that when Berlioz has all these quarter note passages, bum 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 bum, uh, I sit back even more below the written mezzo forte dynamic, because I really want to get out of the way. I'm really trying to support the band um, at that point in time, and especially harmonically, um, we're sort of really tonicizing B flat major. So timpani one definitely has a more predominant dynamic role there. I'm just supporting the upbeats to make sure it just flows well and nothing more, nothing less. I'm not trying to pop out or anything. The time for us to pop out would be, as you heard, some of those sextuplet interruptions, the all of that definitely can be played with a little more chutzpah, a little more guts. So um, all these interruptions just help to sort of feel this sense of chaos and hysteria that's going on. And then super important, even though I didn't do it in the video, when you're the second timpanist, make sure you have one eye on your principal and one eye on your conductor for that final bum when your head gets chopped off and then you have to do the roll. It's so unfortunate when that doesn't come out like super super clean. So make sure you have your eyes on the two people that matter to you at that moment, which is your principal timpanist and your conductor. All right. So if there are no questions on that, we can move on to the next example, which will be the fifth movement of the Berlioz, the Witch's Sabbath. So I'll say right here that while the example is playing, in the beginning, the second timpanist should really be responsible for setting the time that the conductor gives you. But sometimes, like in that instance, the clarinet player will want to go. In that case, your role shifts musically. You go from leading, where you have to sort of follow and you have to help the clarinet achieve what they want. So this you can really tell with the fifth movement that um, the second player really now becomes sort of the predominant force. The second timpanist, they really need to become the leader within this movement. They play more. They set up a lot more musical events, and harmonically, the timpanists they reverse. So in the fourth movement, um, the principal timpanist is really tonicizing the key of the movement. And then in the fifth movement, it sort of switches. Whereas the second timpanist was playing the third um, in the fourth movement. Now the second timpanist is playing the tonic and the dominant. And now the principal timpani is playing the third and the seventh. So it's actually it used to be a quite common practice back in the days of old in the U.S. where the principal timpanist would halfway through the piece suddenly switch and play the second timpani part, um, just because of how important it was musically. I know off the top of my head that Vic Firth did that, um, and maybe Saul Goodman did it too, but don't quote me on that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but nowadays the level of playing has risen to a point where principal timpanists should and can trust their assistants more. That they can just let the assistant play the second part. It doesn't matter. Everyone's happy. Um, at the end passage, the very famous triplets, I opt to cross stick. Some people will opt to shift or double instead, like double inwards, and that's fine. Um, just doing whatever you can to provide clarity because it's just chaos at the end. You know, it's a big party. And so being able to get that nice triplet feel, this feel of rolling along, is super important. For me, that comes through crossing. It just creates better flow. It's really the only place in the repertoire where I will go into the first rehearsal saying, I will cross stick here. I shift or I double in. That's just part of my training. Um, but I'm not worried about different beating angles or anything because really it's about the fluidity and the visual excitement, the pageantry, if you will, of seeing two timpanists, going about it. Um, I just let the mallets at that point provide the clarity. So I use a slightly harder stick than I think most people would, just to again help get that triplet rhythm out. So moving on.
Oh, say,
Uh,
sorry there, David. I had a quick question for you. Actually, it's one of my own. It's not from the Q&A, but just
sure.
from me. I've seen a lot of people with this piece. A lot of timpanists use mutes, and I was wondering about your take on that. And just I know that's a popular thing for people to do sometimes. So just wondering if that's something you use for this piece, or if you use that at all in your playing mutes on the drums.
So for the fourth movement, uh, thanks for the question, Stephen. So for the fourth movement, the opening, it's in the video too. I do have mutes on, and I take them off before the roll. But for the fifth movement, I typically play without mutes. Um, really, my take on mutes is that if it's acoustically necessary, like if I'm in a hall where I need to use mutes so that things can be more clear, or if the sound needs to be more compact, I'll use all sorts of muting. Um, so for this piece, if I'm in a hall that's particularly dry, I actually probably would not use mutes. Um, but for just your typical hall with a very, in the middle acoustic, I'll use mutes for parts of this piece.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you were moving on to the next piece.
Yep. So this next piece, guys, we're gonna examine Jupiter from the Planets by Gustav Holst. This is probably the most well-known piece on the list today that most people tuning in who are percussionists have played or listened to in their life. Um, because it's so tonal and so evocative and accessible, as an assistant timpanist, you have to know this piece. Like, no questions. You have to know all of these pieces, really. But within the hierarchy, Jupiter is a must because you will play the planets in your life many times. So you got to be on your A game for that one. Okay, Josh, you can pause it right here. Sorry, I'm gonna go section by section and break this down a little bit. So the first passage, you can hear it's got a lot of bite, but you also need a lot of body because you are supporting and playing with the low brass. So I opt to use a stick that's got a bigger head on it that can bring out a little more fundamentals in it, but still has plenty of articulation so you can cut through the band and you can work together with the principal to lead the orchestra and the sound. The second passage coming up, which is the waltz section, the second player again functions more like the principal timpanist. So when you play this spot as an assistant timpanist, you can really bring it out a little more. Um, I'll start the passage with a bigger headed mallet that's softer, just because you're playing with the bass at that point. And then when the principal comes in to join you, I'll switch to a much harder stick to get that clarity. Okay. Awesome. So this part coming up is the very famous chorale, sort of the centerpiece of the entire piece. It's based off of a very famous English tune called, was it? Oh no, I'm blanking. It's like "My God to my country." Oh man, all the English people tuning in are gonna give me some flack for it. But it's a very famous song, near and dear to them. And so you have to play with a very legato sound, as pure a tone as possible, and almost bell tone like, that's got a little shimmer to it, a little point to it, and a lot of overtones in your sound. Even though it's such this grandiose moment and you really want to sing your heart out and play, you really in the beginning you need to lay back and let the strings have their moment because it's still uh, orchestrally focused on them. And then once the whole orchestra is incorporated in, um, you can get bigger and bigger. And so by the time the whole band is playing out, that's when you can come out. So you can sort of hear and see in the video this very gradual and controlled phrasing versus just going gung ho right for it. All right, great. And so you can notice that um, the line is split between the two timpanists, and different players will start the line. If you hear your principal starts to phrase and make a crescendo, like in that video, you got to give it to them. All right. Really push each other to make as much of a shape as you can, because that in turn will hopefully inspire your orchestra colleagues to also shape to it. And it's just such a beautiful moment of music, um, that you should really enjoy as a timpanist, or any instrumentalist, to be quite honest. Josh, you can play the rest down. These are all recapitulations of things that we've played before. The only thing I'll say is I do make an errata in the second timpani part, and I play play it like the first, just because it just sounds the color just sounds too different without the second timpani there. And whether Holst intended that or not, um, it personally bugs me, so I just play it, which you really shouldn't do. But conductors have never given me flack for it, so um, I'd say this is sort of a gamble that you can take, and then better to give them more and have the conductor rein you in than to do less and for him to keep adding stuff. All right, so you can play the rest of the planets down, Josh. Yay! So that's Jupiter for you. Pretty straightforward. There's a lot more passages that we can talk about from that piece for double timpani. There's a beautiful underrated part in the movement that follows it, Saturn. There's a very, very exciting and fun part in the second to last movement, Uranus. Um, and Mars, of course, is also equally as famous as Jupiter, so everybody knows that. But for time's sake, we can continue on. Plus, Jupiter is the only movement that, in my recollection, has been asked for specifically on auditions. So I think it's important to prioritize that movement over the rest when learning and preparing this piece.
Uh, Thank you so much for everything so far, David. Hate to interrupt you, but I do quickly want to have you speak on. I'm about to share this PDF for everyone who's inside the webinar right now. David put together this awesome PDF of a bunch of really cool timpani parts. So while I'm sending it, David, I was hoping you could just kind of tell people what it is and how you compiled this stuff.
Sure. So all of these timpani parts that you guys are looking at, these are parts that I've played from, and they're all in score form. So you get to see the first part and the second part running concurrently in them, which I think is super helpful for just understanding how how your role is relative to your principal, and it's a nice um comforting anchor for you, like if you're counting rests and you're not sure and your principal comes in, you're like, ah, here we are. It's really great. And the thing that's special about most of these parts, not all of them, but most of them, is that they are handwritten, copied manuscripts from Cloyd Duff's original handwritten parts. So, for those who don't know, Cloyd Duff was the very famous principal timpanist of the Cleveland Orchestra for many, many years. Um, I'm pretty sure a large majority of timpanists in the US can sort of trace their musical lineage back to Duff at some point. I can with all of my teachers, all of my timpani teachers. Um, so it's just an exciting piece of history. This was hand copied by one of his students, Dwight Thomas, who used to play in the Omaha Symphony, and so I'm happy that I can pass these cool handwritten manuscripts forward to you guys, so you can use it in your own preparation, your own practice, your own rehearsals, or if you just want to nerd out, that's cool too. So
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, feel free to just keep. We have more rep to get to, so let's just keep on plowing through.
yep, let's keep on plowing. So the next piece is Leonard Bernstein's On the Waterfront. This is a suite based on a movie that premiered in the 60s. Um, and so this piece is very raw. It's almost Rite of Spring like. So I don't aim to play with like a pretty sound necessarily. I try to think more along parameters of just a drum set player, and you're just going for really intensity and drive more so than going for like sound quality, which is what we do 99% of the time as timpanists. Um, so I usually I do that, and because there's so much layering between the two timpanists, and the principal percussionist will typically be playing this very complicated tom tom part as well with you guys, so you all sort of function as a drum set player. So every time a player comes in, the previous player has to reduce their dynamics so that the new voice can be heard, and that's really important, so that it doesn't become too chaotic. I just let the groove and the intensity of the music take care of the dynamics and the phrasing for me. Awesome. Okay, so um, if you all have the music and you're following along with the part, you can see that both timpani parts have this written glissando in it. And so there's been a debate on, do you re-articulate the second note or no? And I try to just play them on two separate drums, because there's a marking in the score. It might be in the part two that Bernstein preferred that you play the two notes separately, and that the glissando was sort of a contingency on if your drums did not have the range. So for the principal part, I played it for demonstration. I play it as two separate notes. But for the assistant part on the right hand side, I play them as a glissando on the 23, so you could hear the effect. Um, Part of getting that slurred feeling of a glissando, um, to help with that, I use a double sticking there, so doubling two notes on my right, so that way it slurs that second note. It makes it a little less clear, and I think it gets that effect of the glissando a little better. And it also helps with bringing the accented notes out, um, which again helps us reinforce that sense of groove. All right, so we're gonna move on. This is sort of the porgy, if you will, of double timpani parts, like a very infamous um, double timpani part. This is Carl Nielsen's Fourth Symphony, nicknamed the Inextinguishable. Um, it's a musical depiction of World War One, and it's a real musical fight for humanity. Um, so this piece has a lot of weight to it. Um, Timpani 2 really needs to phrase to the first timpanist as it's a call and response. And the second timpanist is very special because they don't play the entire piece. In fact, there are some stories where the conductor, asks the second timpanist to make this very dramatic, walk on stage or even walk out from the audience and play the piece. Um, so it's full of a ton of that sort of theatrics to it, but also there's musically it's very complex. The orchestra is broken up into sides, so you'll hear that conflict between the two timpanists. Yeah, what a bear of a piece. Um, so if you heard, the orchestra is broken up into teams of sorts, with the strings being the predominant voice that joins the side of the principal timpanist, and the brass are sort of on the side, if you will, of the second timpani. So that's really important if you're sort of lost in that moment, um, to hear what voice is coming out, and you sort of have a way to pace yourself and get through it when you're learning and practicing it, because it's musically quite overwhelming. um, for the role at the very end, for people who are looking at the part, it's very complicated because Nielsen writes a rhythm with distinct pitches, but he also writes a tremolo marking on top. A lot of people opt to just play a glissando roll all the way to the top note on whatever drum can fit that note. Um, I personally choose to play the rhythm that's notated and just do a little spurt at the front. I think the rhythm provides the intensity and creates a very natural crescendo with how the pitch and the tessitura rise. And also, Nielsen lived at a point in time where writing glissandos became more and more common. Um, so he could have very easily, if he wanted a roll to me, he could have just written just a regular roll with a glissando mark to the top note, and then I would definitely play that as a roll. But since he writes the rhythms in the individual pitches, my interpretation is that Nielsen wanted every single pitch to be heard as clearly as you can within the context of that. So that's my take on the ending. So you'll hear two different versions. You'll either hear that or you'll hear just a regular glissando roll. Um, Moving on, the final selection that I'd like to talk about is Mahler's First Symphony, nicknamed Titan. It's very important to know this piece. It is programmed so much in a professional setting, and because it's sort of the shortest, the simplest Mahler of them all, content-wise, it's made its rounds in collegiate settings and even some very top-notch high school and youth orchestra programs have programmed Mahler 1. Um, so for young students, this is also a very good opportunity musically to jump into double timpani playing. Now the second timpanist sits tacit for the first three movements. So it's a very conventional symphony for the first three. And then the second timpanist suddenly jumps in on equal footing as the principal. And you'll see that in these selections. So for the first passage that we're going to play, this is a storm scene. The roles within these scenes have to be very aggressive with the articulation, a very fast and almost downstroke like quality to it, because you need that intensity. And the two timpanists really work together to sort of create the imagery of a storm that sort of pushes the orchestra musically and dynamically. Yeah. So the end of that first excerpt, um, similar to how the second timpanist has to look at the first and the conductor in the Berlioz, the principal timpanist, if you're playing principal, you have to keep one eye on the bass drum player, one eye on the conductor. And the bass drum player should do the same. Keep an eye on you and an eye on the conductor, because that is uh, such a very easy pothole to fall in musically. Um, so moving on, um, the second passage is sort of a more romantic scene. It's a love scene. This is, the hero has come home to, his partner, and it's the reunion of a lifetime. The roles here have to have way less articulation and much more warmth to it. And you'll see what I do this thing, which is a sort of a thing that I picked up from Don Liuzzi of the Philadelphia Orchestra, where I sort of, on my prep, I have a little bit of tension in my forearms, and then I sort of loosen that tension as I come down to begin the roll. So that way the roll, the strokes become more supple and have this warmth to it. Um, and in this section, you're really 100% supporting, because you're not important here. It's really the strings are important. So you've got to sit a little back until maybe the third roll of the passage, and then you can go for it a little. Yeah, so that passage, even though it's very technically simple, it's actually quite deceptive, because you have to sound like one timpanist at that point, just trading off and passing the baton, so to speak. Um, so whatever your principal gives you, you got to take it, and then you in turn, you have to make sure that you play in a way that your principal can easily catch the baton from you, and you just trade off like that for a very long time until you're playing close to niente. Um, we did it my first season in Shanghai, and I remember we played it on tour, and that might have been the longest and softest role I ever had to play in my life by the end. It really spans the gamut of dynamics, from a very loud and full warm sound to, whisper soft. Um, so this final passage, the last thing we're going to talk about in this class, this is now the hero has won the war. The hero is welcomed back home with triumph. So it has to have this very bold quality to it. The roles have to have a ton of energy. Um, but it's not intensity. So we still have to maintain this very pure sound quality. Here, my single strokes really have to sound a lot like bell tones. Um, so it's a fast lift and a drop, and then lifting off the head as fast as you can to get this warmth and get the drum head to ring to its fullest potential. Um, you'll see that I pedal a passage that the trombones and the tubas are playing, because I want to melodically and harmonically support them there as timpani 1. Um, the second when I play timpani 2, I tend to double a lot of the timpani 1 stuff here at the end, such as you'll see the beginning rhythm and some of these fortissimo single strokes, because I really want my principal to save their energy for the very end. And so if I can help in any way, that makes it all the more sweeter by the time we get to the end of this bear of a piece. And for people who are curious, I do double the low D at the very end of the piece on both parts. Yeah, I had to cut that one short because the audience in that recording applauds right away. So it's a very abrupt cut, but hopefully you all get the point.
Yeah, it's a fantastic spot to end on. Thanks so much, David. An incredible piece. I was just reminded as I was listening to that, I was like, man, all the best pieces have two timpani parts. The planet, I mean, Symphony Fantastique. I mean, it's so fun to listen to music like that, especially here on the West Coast starting my morning. It's like feeling really good now after hearing all that music. And also, we have to say thank you so much, David, for putting this recording together. This is so incredible, guys. I don't know. I mean, there's no, just to be honest, like laying down both timpani parts. So thanks so much. And yeah, we do have some good questions and get to all set.
All right. Okay. But before Stephen, you jump into those, the first thing is that your audio is cutting in and out just a little bit. For me, I'm not sure. Maybe we can ask the participants. Can you guys hear Stephen? Okay, it might just be on my end. Every once in a while that happens. But as we're figuring that out, I just want to encourage everyone. I'm going to drop a link right now into the chat, guys, because we have something pretty exciting going on, which is at www.thepercussionconservatory.com/scholarship 2021. And if you go to the website, you will see that it is there under our About page, and then the scholarship. We have a $1,000 scholarship, and the top 3 finalists, including that winner who gets that award, the top 3 finalists will also receive a free membership to our Percussion Conservatory studio starting next year, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, will be 50 masterclasses for an exclusive core group of our members who want to get an even more in-depth experience, people who really want to take the next level in their career. We're going to have this studio that we're creating next year. There's going to be a full announcement about everyone who's participating and all the classes we're doing in November. And while that's happening, the deadline, guys, for this scholarship is coming right up on October 15th. But don't worry, even in these last 5 days, you still have time to apply, because the application is 1 mallet solo of choice, 8 minutes or less, de Lecluse 9 on the snare drum, and a very short essay question. And anyone age 18 to 24 who's currently enrolled in any sort of percussion education or percussion performance degree program, you guys are all welcome to apply. And if you feel like you should be eligible for this scholarship and for whatever reason you don't fit into our eligibility requirements, give us an email, because this is about, we're trying, as I said before, to make percussion education, percussion as a career accessible to as many people as we can. That's the vision and mission for the Percussion Conservatory. So guys, please jump on to that scholarship. If you're watching this on Facebook, you'll find that the link is at the top of the post description. It's our link tree. You click on that, and then it's the very first link. You can apply for our $1,000 scholarship. And all of our artists, participating in this platform, were so helpful in funding the initial scholarship, because we had so much excitement around our launch, and we raised all of the money for the scholarship and much more. We're already fundraising into next year's scholarship. Everything that you guys buy on the website, every time you guys donate money to these classes, it all goes at least 10% up to 100%, depending on what type of item you're getting, is going into our scholarship fund, so that we can create these scholarships every single year, and they're going to get bigger and bigger, and the awards are going to get larger. So again, thank you to David and all of our artists on the platform who are, helping me and Steven, and everyone else who's participating, helping us make this a dream come true, really. It's working, and if you don't have the ability to donate for this class, that's totally fine. I always say this: please just share it, especially this scholarship. If you guys know someone who should be applying for this scholarship, please share it with them right now. Let them know. Say, hey, oh my gosh, there's $1,000 up for grabs, and all you have to do is record 2 pieces back to back. That's it. That's basically the entire application. So it doesn't get any easier than this, guys, as percussionists. I tried, when I was structuring the scholarship, I tried to make it as absolutely easy to apply to as possible. The entire application is on our website right there. It's you can do the whole thing in less than probably 5 minutes after you make your recording. So that's it about the scholarship. We're very excited to host, to announce the winners when they come through. That'll be in December. And our judges for the finals will be Matthew Strauss, Mr. Edward Choi, and Jihei Jung. So without further ado, Stephen, please take us away with the Q&A. Thanks for listening, guys.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I think I had an internet issue. I got bounced out of the call. Can everyone hear me okay, David?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. For some reason, too, I lost the questions that were in the Q&A. It cleared them out. So let me see if I can somehow find those again. It just says no questions, which I know is not true because I saw all of the questions.
That's amazing.
So I can start. The first one, actually, I remember was just about somebody made a comment about all of your mallets there behind you, David. And just wondering if you could talk a little about mallet selection, mention some of the ones that you were using in those recordings. I see a lot of ball wrap sticks behind you, but I noticed a lot of what you were using was cartwheel wraps. And I know you're also a JG percussion artist as well, so I'm guessing a lot of those might have been JG mallets. So yeah, if you could just take us through your mallet collection, that'd be great. Place to start.
Sure. I don't want to get too into it because we can really go down the rabbit hole with mallet selection. But basically, because of how I was brought up musically, the players in the Philadelphia Orchestra, they use a ton of mallets. If you go to see a concert, it's not, it's very normal to see them have 2 or even sometimes 3 or 4 music stands full of mallets. And then when I went to grad school, I studied with Javon Gilliam from the National Symphony, and he's a very, keep it clean, nice and minimalist as far as mallet selection goes. Um, so this is sort of the collection that I've accumulated, or part of it that I've accumulated over the years. Um, if I have it my way, I will play, predominantly with American style mallets, with cartwheel wraps, carbon fiber handles. But because my principal timpanist has a European-based playing background, so that's why I've accumulated some of these ball sticks back here so that I can sort of match him when we play some of these double timpani repertoire stuff. And it's also fun for me because, um, I get to do stuff with my technique. I get to do stuff with my touch that I wouldn't otherwise normally do when I'm playing timpani on a program. So what I used in the recording um, is primarily a mix of David Herbert mallets, um, which are now made by JG Percussion. And what I had in the video was a mix of all sorts of stuff. I had Jason stuff. I had the original California Percussion Herbert mallets in the mix. I had custom mallets in the mix. Um, and then I also supplemented some of the more articulate and clear stuff with some sticks that Jeff Luff made. Shout out to Jeff if he's watching. Um, but they're just beautiful. They're on a very sharply tapered carbon fiber handle, and that taper just gets the response and gets the stick popping off the head quicker. Um, and not to spend too much time, but generally for mallet selection, it really depends on too many factors: the repertoire, the kind of drums you're playing on, uh, the acoustics, how your principal timpanist plays. Um, so if you don't have the means to accumulate and accrue a large collection of mallets, the best advice is to be flexible, expand your touch. If you can do a lot with your touch and your placement, that goes wonders. That takes you very far in your playing. And then actually, when you can expand that and then supplement with a large collection of mallets, I mean, the possibilities are truly endless. Like I said, you can go down a rabbit hole with the subject.
Yeah, in a percussion class, we could talk about mallets all day, right? Timpani as well.
All day, all day. Even
So,
worse with timpanists, I think.
yeah, maybe so. Kind of along those lines, we had some questions just about for students. If you had any mallets suggested for timpani students as they're getting started, just to kind of build, at least a basic set to begin with, and also, if a timpani student doesn't have access to drums all the time, would you recommend a timpani pad as something for them to have at home, just to work on their hands and technique and things like that?
Sure. Um, so to go in order, I would say a good starting pair or two of mallets. Just get something that fits under the parameters of a general or a hard general, um, because it's kind of a lawyer answer because there's things about your technique. If it's the technique you're going to stick with, and that's what I think makes it so difficult about recommending timpani mallets. But I would say no matter no matter the technique, any sort of like a medium or medium small sized head with German felt always works. Nowadays, people are getting all up on what kind of core material to use. So I'm going to give a very fair answer and say, you know, if you're a European style player, just go for a nice, medium cork ball core with 2 or 3 layers. If you're an American style player, anything along the lines of a Duff 3, a basic wood core with 1 layer of German felt wrapped cartwheel style can always take you wonders. Whether you buy David Herbert's version, Leo Soto's version, um, there's too many things on the market now. But I'd say if you have a general, you have a hard, and you have a soft or a medium soft, that's always, I think, a really good place to start.
Definitely. Keeping in line with the theme about talking about just student development, do you suggest any tuning, pedaling exercises, anything that you use at home to work on your tuning and pedaling technique?
Sure. And to continue on with your student question, I know I didn't answer the thing about practicing at home. Um, if you can get any kind of practice pad, it doesn't have to be a timpani practice pad. It can be any regular practice pad. Just understand that whatever stick you use on that surface, it's going to wear out. So I would say whenever I practice on a pad, I tend to use a hard stick, even wood, just to get the feeling of just something rebounding off of a head. Um, as far as working on my pedaling and working on intonation, it really comes with a lot of ear training, a lot of just knowing your intervals, being able to think about music, whether it doesn't have to be classical music, it can be pop music. And for my students that are listening to this, they can testify that, I tell them, you have to find a lot of music with all different intervals, so that way, if you need an ascending fourth, you can sing, Here Comes the Bride. You need an ascending fifth, you sing, Star Wars, or, the monkeys thing from Wizard of Oz. There's so many, intervals are integral to our musical language. So you can find plenty of examples to sing. And then just like really listening to the drums, because when the drums are consonant and in tune with each other, they will react to each other. So if you like play a note and then you isolate it and you hear all the other drums are ringing, that's a good sign that you're really playing in tune. And then the last thing I'd say, um, this is sort of like I guess kind of embarrassing to say on the internet, but not really, but just sing a lot. Um, I do it in the car a lot, and because the car, you don't have to worry about anybody listening to you, so you don't have to be worried about so much like being shy about doing any kind of public singing or whatever. But that way you can really hear um, how you hear music, and are you really in tune with everything and whatever. So whether you're singing your timpani part in the car to a piece of classical music, or you're literally just singing a pop song, I think that's super important to listen and sing a lot to develop pitch.
Definitely, I love that recommendation. I think we, as percussionists especially, don't use that enough. We don't sing enough, whether it's pitched, or I like to sing like Delacluse etudes on snare drum. Just with like kind of the drum speak kind of singing. It really helps with phrasing and just rhythm and really internalizing pulse and things like that. So I'm definitely going to piggyback and recommend that. I think that's a great point. Moving along to some other questions, we have rolls. You have a super smooth, clean roll. That's really awesome to watch that on your videos. How do you develop consistency with that? And are there any exercises or etudes that you use specifically for rolls?
Um, yeah, um, I would say that the biggest thing for me when I play these, when I practice my roles is um, first and foremost getting used to doing all kinds of roles. So again, to sort of go with my contrasting musical background, um, Javon has always had sort of this roll speed that sort of works for the whole span of the instrument, and it's at a certain tempo. And so I've always practiced that roll on a variety of head tensions and pitches. To that same extent, Don Liuzzi in the Philadelphia Orchestra has said that there's always sort of a perfect roll speed for each note in each range of each drum. So he likes to say like there's this, each drum, each pitch has its own role character, right? Its own personality. And so just developing the gamut of roll speeds through sort of simple things, uh, getting almost drumline like, things as simple as like eight on a hand, alternating roll exercises, playing double stops, um, I think is super important, and doing it in front of a mirror. So very often, if I'm not playing in front of a mirror, I will record myself with my phone in mirror view or selfie mode, and I will just watch my hands. Like, are they moving at the same velocity? Is the stick height the same? Is the pad giving the sound that I want, or is the timpani giving the sound I want? Um, so doing stuff like eight on a hand, eight on another hand, double stops, and then alternating, which ends up ultimately being a roll. That's sort of how I go about practicing my rolls and just making sure it visually matches what I'm hearing.
Cool. I find that fascinating, and it reminds me so much of my own like education as well. Teachers having different teachers that are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Talking about Javon, and here's one consistent roll speed you use all the time, and then Don, oh, every single note has its own roll speed. Like, couldn't be more different. And both, you know, fantastic principal players of major orchestras. And so as students, a lot of the time we're left to go, huh, okay, you know, where do I fit? You know, where's my you know, how do I make sense of those two types of instruction? So I find that really, really interesting.
Absolutely. I
Um,
would say to piggyback off you, Stephen, it's like you really have to pick and choose your moments within the repertoire to make those musical decisions for yourself. Some pieces I want to just have that same color the entire time. Um, and then other times, you know, I want that color most of the time, but there's some gem of a moment where I really want to do something different there and make it pop out. So I think that's really up to us and our artistic and creative sides um, to just geek out and come up with a solution that works. And I think no matter what you do, you just play it really convincingly, no matter where you come from pedagogically.
totally. Um, Another thing about just timpani strokes, we got like one or two more questions here. Someone asked, how can you play a more legato sound? How is that something that you work on in your practicing, is getting a legato sound?
So there's a few ways we can do it right. Sort of the cheat answer is use a softer stick, but sometimes I want a legato sound and I'm using a harder stick. And so how do you do that? It really comes down to how I play the stroke as far as like what muscle groups I use. It comes down to the velocity or the speed of the stroke. And then it also comes down to how much I lift off the head and the speed of lifting off the head. So I will, I'll typically do something a little along the parameters of what um, David Herbert, who's the principal timpanist of Chicago Symphony, what he likes to do, I've seen a lot in his playing, is he really incorporates a lot of forearm that sort of supports the stroke. It sort of shaves off that front articulation. So I like to use that a lot for just general legato playing. And then when I need to go super, super legato, no attack, um, I usually employ this J stroke that Don Liuzzi's been sort of very famous for, where you sort of hit the drum and you wind in. Um, and so it's just practicing those strokes isolated and maximizing and exaggerating um, the velocity of your stroke and the kind of muscles you use, and you'll learn through trial and error like what sounds good on top of the drum, what doesn't sound good, what you hear on the drum sounds different 50, 100 feet out. Um, and gradually you'll parse it all down to such that you'll have developed a pretty legato stroke. So I would say those are the three factors: is um, the muscle groups you use, the velocity of the stroke, and the velocity of the lift. So I tend to lift very high off the drum, especially for legato playing. Um, so lifting high and lifting slowly. And then when I need more clarity, you know, you can always quicken the stroke, quicken the lift, and then shrink down the muscle groups.
Yeah, definitely spoken like a true Javon Gilliam student. It's all about lift, right? With him, it's just he just harps on that so much.
Shout out to Javon, hashtag lift all day, all day.
Exactly. I think that, hey guys, I think we're down to our last question. If anyone has any last, final questions for David, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A. One more here. This is actually an interesting one that I'm really curious about for you, is just about stage setup. When you're playing a piece that requires two timpanists, like the Mahler and the Berlioz, and do you set the timpanis together side by side? Do you always use the same mallet as your principal player? Do you coordinate? How much of that do you coordinate beforehand? Just as far as setup and mallet choice with the two timpanists.
Um, that's a very good question. First, it really depends on the repertoire. So there's way more double timpani pieces out there besides what I talked about. Over half of Mahler's symphonies all are written for double timpani, or have like a moment where someone has to walk over and play a second timpani part. Um, so it really depends on the musical content. For everything that we've played today, I'll have the drums set side by side with my principal. If we're playing something that's a little more like supportive, like entirely supportive, I can think of off the top of my head, Alpine Symphony by Richard Strauss, Mahler 6, Mahler 9, um, that kind of a piece. I will typically set myself a little behind my principal, and as to which side, it really depends on the range that I'm playing. If I'm playing more stuff on the low end, I'd like to I actually be to the right of my principal, so I can, when I'm playing that low range, I can have my visual on him. And vice versa. If I'm playing a lot of stuff in the high range, like in Mahler 1, it's really optimal for me to be to the left of my principal because he's playing a lot of the low range stuff. As for coordinating stick selection and stuff, it's been a process because uh, my principal timpanist Sun Xiao, um, he's grown up playing sort of in a more French and European style, and so his stroke is quite different from mine. Um, and so as a result, I've I've had this thing where whatever he uses, I have to adjust by a grade or two in a certain direction. And I sort of figured that out just through trial and error and understanding the acoustics of the hall and the acoustics of the orchestra with how they play. Um, I'd say for people who are either on their tenure track in an assistant job and are running into those issues, or are just doing it in a college setting, bring a ton of sticks your first rehearsal, and then put a recording device up front and just like listen to yourself and like take mental notes like of everything you used on a separate piece of paper or whatever, or mark it on your phone. Just like write down everything that you use. So when you listen back to the rehearsal, you're like, okay, this stick kind of worked. This stick didn't work. And what you'll find is once you're in the concert, or even in the rehearsal process, the conductor may ask for a different stick. And so over time, it's just an adjustment. The assistant timpani, like I said, is the chameleon. It's a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimenting. So just keeping your ears open and letting yourself sort of be free to do stuff that seems musically scary to you, because it might not actually be to the audience.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again so much, David. And I have to say thanks also to our attendees. These questions were fantastic, really, really interesting and getting into the repertoire and technique. So really thank you guys for joining us here in the webinar and asking these awesome questions. I don't know if my audio got cut off earlier, but I was also trying to say thanks so much to David for recording at such a high level all of these double timpani pieces. This is going to be a huge asset to people as they go to learn these works, and yeah, it's really great to have that. So yeah, I'll throw it over to Josh. Any final, if anyone has any last questions or anything, now's the time, just as we're wrapping up.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you just said. Just mostly thanks to Mr. David Liu. Yeah, I mean, epic amount of content for like a singular masterclass. I think we understand in our industry. Someone asks, "Hey, you want to do a masterclass?" And we're all busy. And David just had a major audition and performances and tons of stuff. He's been a busy guy. So the fact that he was able to put this together, and not only the amount of it, but the speed at which he did it was just phenomenal. So, this is reflecting something just in general that's been really exciting about the percussion conservatory, which is that it's not only a place to it's not only a place for students, which of course we're excited about all the young people who have been joining on, but it's also this place where, as we were just talking about, with like two principals from completely different places, or you might study with both of them and they have completely different ideas and they both end up in really big spots. One thing that's been so cool about this process is seeing how international it's been, and people viewing it from all over the world, and that the ideas continue to grow, and that we're sharing lots of different types of ideas. And as we continue to move forward with more artists giving master classes and more people who will be featured in our studio next year, I think this is really becoming a theme I've noticed of the Percussion Conservatory, is this idea that no one person has all the answers. Like you're never going to find that one person who just can do everything for you. And it's great to have a private lesson teacher, obviously. Like, you need a mentor going through this process to help you make sense of everything. But no one person will ever be able to give you everything. So, every time that, guys, these classes just are so valuable. Like, the fact that we're doing these for free is I really hope everyone just watches them, and go on the website, like, watch this recording again, just go through, like, this is the stuff. Like, these are lessons, like, these are expensive lessons that are just being put out there for free. So I mean, it's been so amazing, the willingness of our artists to help us with that part of the project. So just, yeah, anyways, that's a very long way to say it's been really cool, and thank you, David.
No, thank you guys. It's been my pleasure. Um, I just wanted to, thank you and Steven, I mean, for spearheading all of this. This is such a great initiative. And I have to thank several people, because obviously this was a lot of repertoire, a lot of stuff to get through. So it took a lot of people um, to help out. So first and foremost, I need to thank Temple University. I need to thank Professor Phil O'Banion, who lets me, go back and practice and do these recording projects. And because this time, actually, initially I recorded at Temple, but there was an issue with the video. So then I recorded it last week, and then I realized there's some issues with the video, and so I had to re-record it all at home. But I wanted to thank him and the graduate students there, Caleb, Emily Rose, and Zach, who carved out time in the studio's practice schedule so that I could record. So I wanted to thank them profusely for their help with that. And I wanted to thank Sean Kennedy, who is my very first drum teacher, but in the course of the pandemic, he taught me how to do a lot of these, like, tricks with syncing video and audio together and just making it cleaner and cleaner. And so I've got to give him a shout out too. And of course, all the great companies that have made, all these sticks for me and stuff. Shout out to JG, shout out to Jeff Luft, and all, and the various companies that I endorse. Um, their continued support truly means the world to me. So thank you all. It it takes a lot of people to get these master classes going for all the artists. So just thank you for everything you guys have been doing and putting out there for the community.
And I'll let everyone know as well. You may be signed up already, but if you're not, please go register for our last two classes in this series. We have Andy Watkins of the San Diego Symphony coming up on October 25th, so that's a couple weeks away. And then just a few days after that, the last class in our series will be Scott Christian of the National Symphony in Washington, D.C., and that's on October 30th. I believe both of those are at 11 a.m. Eastern Time as well. So please check out both of those. More to come on the assistant timpani position and auditions and everything kind of surrounding this special position in the orchestra. So that will kind of those last two classes by the end of this month will conclude our excellent assistant series. And then as we kind of move from this series onward, please stay tuned to our page, all of our social media pages, for some exciting announcements coming your way in late October, early November, about what we have planned for you after the new year. So please stay tuned. Thanks so much again for being here and for great questions in the webinar, and everyone on Facebook, thanks for watching as well. And yeah, I'll throw it over to Josh.
Yeah, you said it. Man, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear just that happening. It's all good stuff, guys. I am very, very excited about the things that we are doing and will continue to do. And I keep saying this, but yeah, it's all working, guys. Especially the community, everyone who's chiming in. Please, yeah, continue to share this stuff, because the more we share it, the more stuff we can make for you. And that's really what we want to be doing. We want to be making as much useful, valuable content as we possibly can. And beyond just these master classes, we have a lot of really cool types of content coming in November. It's going to be a big month. So we look forward to sharing that with you soon. But until then, guys, let's give a round of applause to David Liu. And we will definitely be in touch. David, the last thing I saw was just that someone had asked to like make a list, if you have time, to make a list of all the mallets you used in all of the excerpts. If you do have time to do that, guys, we'll throw that into the Facebook page. But let's also remember that David has probably spent way too many hours already getting this class ready. So, but all of the performance videos will be up on our Facebook page soon, so you guys can check it out there. This class has been recorded. It'll go up on our website, and we'll attach the PDF. You just need to give us your email so that we can get that to you. And until the next one, guys, that's it. We'll see you very soon. Wherever you are in the world, have either a good morning, evening, or night, and we'll catch you all very soon. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.